Most people think that to connect to an EC2 instance using SSH, you need to open port 22 in a security group and have a keeper assigned. But what if I told you you actually don't need to have that at all? In this video, I will show you how to connect to a EC2 instance using AWS Systems Manager and particularly a Session Manager. And we will do that both from the AWS console and directly from your local terminal using the AWS CLI. So no SSH keys, no open ports, and actually we could be able to do it also without public IP. But there is a little bit of a but on the IP topic, which I will cover in the video. So let's move to setting all that up. Alright, so I'm already logged into my EC2 console. I will be using OS X for that on my Mac, but you can use any operating system that you need. As mentioned in the beginning of the video, this traditionally accessing an EC2 instance would require for you to have a public IP, an open port 22, and manage some SSH keys. And that creates a little bit of a security risk and operational overhead. But with actually this AWS System Manager and Session Manager that I mentioned, AWS gives us a better way. It will give us the secure access without any inbound rules required in our security group. And if you would need to have that, you will have also a full audit logging via CloudTrail. So what we need to do in order to make it work? Let's firstly navigate to our EC2. So let me type EC2 here, and we will try to launch our first instance. So we will go to launch instances, and let's maybe call it a SSM just for the sake of argument. And I will choose Amazon Linux, the 2023 version, the default one. And here is a little bit of a first gotcha with the underlying AMI. In order for the thing to work, we need to have what is called an SSM agent installed. And for Amazon Linux, the SSM agent is actually already installed, so we don't need to do anything. And actually on many of the AMIs, underlying AMIs, it is already installed. If you will have an image that doesn't have SSM agent installed, it's quite an easy thing to do, and for sure you will find a small introduction to that in the docs, but actually this particular thing will be out of scope of this particular video. So let's run the T3 micro, the first thing that I mentioned, right? The keeper name. We will actually proceed without the keeper. That's something that we can do because we will be using the SSM. The second thing, let's allow for the wizard to create a security group, but we will actually not allow SSH traffic from anywhere. And that's the second thing that I mentioned. The third thing, I would be able actually to go here and let's say this auto-assign public IP, right? Should we change that to disable? I will leave that enabled, and there is an underlying network thing regarding that. Because in order for it to work, the SSM agent needs to be able to communicate with SSM API, right? But in order to do that, by default in AWS, I need to have an internet access. So that's why in the default VPC that I have in our, and all of us have by default in AWS account, we have a public subnet and we need the public IP to have the internet. But if you would have, for example, a private subnet and some kind of a private network with a NAT gateway, then it would work, right, without the public IP. Or you can have private IP, don't have any NAT gateway connected to that, so no internet connectivity, but then you would need to create VPC endpoint in order for the SSM to work privately, but that again, something out of scope. We will do a very basic introduction here and a very basic setup. So we will have this public IP, but I'm just pointing all of those things out. All right, so let's scroll down, and actually we can launch it. So probably our instance will be launched soon, and we will stumble onto one of the first issues that we will probably be debugging throughout this session, and this is something that you can stumble across, so we will go through that. So let's wait for this instance to be available. It's already in running state. So what would we normally do, right? We would click this connect, and then we, for example, would have the EC2 instance connect. We have a public IP, so maybe we would be able to connect, but actually we don't have a security group and the port 22 opened, right? That's why this will actually fail, because this will actually time out the error establishing SSH connection. The second approach, right, would be probably the normal SSH client, but we have no associated key pair, right? So we will go with this approach of this video, so SSM Session Manager, but we have an offline status, right? SSM engine unable to acquire credentials. So in order for the SSM to work, the instance needs to have a particular permissions and a particular role, and we didn't attach that yet, right? So if we will go back to the instance, we will see that IAM role is blank. So what we need to do, we need to go to Actions, to Security, and modify IAM role. On this account, I don't have actually no IAM role, so we will create one, and by default, actually, you don't need to know too much about the policies. Actually, by default, you can see that role name, let's maybe call it an SSM access, and the default policy is already there because we need to have actually this Amazon SSM managed instance core, and we don't need to have any additional policies. So let's actually make it work. Let's update the policy here. That should attach this, create this policy in the first place, and then attach it to our instance. So if we will go here and we will go to our instance, you will see that we have the SSM access, right? But if I will go here, and actually if I would even try to refresh that, it will stay in the offline status. And here is another little bit of a gotcha, right? So SSM agent starts when the system starts. So when we were starting that instance, actually there were no roles, so there were no credentials attached to that instance. That's why the easiest thing to do right now will be just to reboot it so that the system would start over, and actually the SSM agent should have credentials already, right? So let's click connect here, and we will need to take couple of seconds for it to probably start. Let me refresh the page, still offline. Let's refresh it one more time, still offline, but it should get up soon, right? Third refresh is the charm. So ping status online, session manager connection status online. So let's click our connect, right? So I will click the connect, and let's see what we have here. Hey, we have our SSH connection. So I can do an LS here, I can do PWD, right? I can check the host name, it's the IP 31.27.103. So 31.27.103, we are logged in to this instance. So this is how you would be able to do it from the standpoint of the AWS console, right? But as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, and probably this is the approach that you will be taking by yourself, would be the SSH from the CLI, right? And from your local terminal. So let's go to our console. I will go to the terminal and make it a little bit bigger for you. And now I already have AWS CLI configured. So if I would do AWS S3 LS, for example, I should get the buckets back, so everything is working. So now let's try to use the AWS CLI in order to connect to our instance. So I will do it AWS SSM start what we need to type here? Start session, right? And then we need to give a particular target. And that target will be an instance ID. So let's run that and let's see what we will get. You see that we are getting an error. So the instance is not connected. So how we would go about that? And actually, this thing is probably the region. So what happens underneath is actually that this is, let's say, regions code, right? And if I would do cat on my AWS config, you will see that I actually set my user and my AWS CLI as US East 1. But I launched my instance in the Europe Stockholm 1 region, right? And the particular availability zone here. So what I need to do, I actually need to change the region, and that's something that you can stumble onto also while configuring that. So I need to go to EU North 1. So if I will take that and do a region of EU North 1, that problem should be solved. So now we see another problem, right? So we stumbled onto a little bit of a debugging session, but that actually is great because you can see what type of issues we need to resolve in order to make it work. So Session Manager plugin is not found. It's actually part of the CLI that we need, and we are given some kind of a hint here. We need to install something on the operating system. So we need to have a Session Manager plugin installed, and here you can see install the Session Manager plugin for AWS CLI. You can pick the Windows, Linux, Mac OS. I will pick Mac OS, right? And what I need to do, I need to firstly download a PKG for that. So let's do a curl here, and then we need to run it, right? So we will do this. Let me type my password here for this instance. And then we will need to do also the linking. And now verify the installation was successful. So let's try it one more time, right? Let's run this AWS SSM start session target and let's wait. Oh, starting session with session ID. And hey, we have our prompt. We have the same prompt that we had in the console. So one more time, let's do ls, more or less the same result, right? Let's do pwd, we are in user bin. Let's do hostname, and you can see it's the same exact IP 27103, 27103. So we were able to log in to our instance, to our shell through the Session Manager. And as I mentioned, right, we didn't actually open, we have this public IP, right? I already mentioned that one part, but we actually, first of all, didn't attach any keys, the SSH keys. And the second thing, we actually don't have anything in the inbound rules. You can see it's blank. So we don't have like SSH or I don't know, HTTPS or whatever else. So it's working, right? We were able to achieve it. Let me go out of that and you can see exiting session. And actually one more note on the SSM. If we would go here to the Session Manager, you would see that actually we can monitor those sessions. Here will be the session history. So those 2 sessions that we created and some other sessions that I was working on previously. And even one more thing, there is something here like a fleet manager. You can see all the instances that have actually the agent running and are connected here to the SSM. So if you're learning AWS, right, or maybe working in the DevOps, this is one of these maybe small things that makes a big difference, especially from the security perspective, right? So I don't know, and maybe you can let me know in the comments, do you still use SSH, or maybe you already switched to that approach with the Session Manager. Okay, that will be everything for this video. Thank you so much for joining and being with me, and I hope to see you in some other videos on this channel. So see ya! and take care.